Ophelia was in good health. Despite her delicate appearance, she had never suffered a single illness and was always full of life and wore a radiant smile. It had been more than 10 years since he saw her like this, but since then he had been constantly observing her movements. But this had never happened. When did you faint? Looking at the date on the letter, it seems like it was about 10 days ago. Byron had ordered that they report immediately if anything happened to Ophelia, but no matter how quickly the report was released, it would take time for it to reach Byron. It was because Byron was fleeing and wandering across this vast continent. He was able to receive a letter within 10 days containing information about Ophelia thanks to a unique John Gu, a magical telescope that had been programmed to use a magical tracking device to deliver letters to any location. If it weren't for this, he would have had to wait a long time to hear from Ophelia. Byron jumped from his seat. All he wanted to do was rush to the capital, Venator, immediately. The fact that they were chasing him and the fact that all he had on his body was a robe. He didn't care at all. He felt like he couldn't bear not seeing Ophelia in person right away. But the longing for the woman he loved was short-lived. A more instinctive emotion held him back. It was fear. Byron looked down, where his right hand should have been, with a frightened expression. From time to time he still woke up with a pain in his right hand that no longer existed. It was a world where healing magic could completely heal any wound, but there was no way to recover a cleanly severed hand. I didn't want to admit it. The fact that she feared Roderick, the man who took everything from her, lovers and honor. They took everything from him, including everything he deserved. But I was afraid. It was instinct. A herbivore in the presence of a predator could not help but feel fear. And Cloud understood his master's fear. Of course, he had no intention of further disturbing Byron's already uncomfortable feelings by voicing those disloyal thoughts out loud. In the Palace Empire, no one could defeat Roderick Weishafen in swordsmanship. A body stronger than humans and God-given swordsmanship. Although he didn't want to admit it because he was an enemy of the family, Roderick's sword was flawless. Also, I have that greeting from Ophelia. Even God is very unfair. Cloud scared inwardly. He felt reckless fighting such an enemy. The older brother risked his life to protect his master, and since it was something he had to do for his remaining sister-in-law and young nephew, he had no complaints. As Cloud was lost in thought, Byron sat back down on the bed. Seeing him sigh deeply and bury his face in his remaining left hand was pitiful. I will report and publish any further news as it arrives, my lord. Okay, come out. Because I want to be alone. Yes, my lord. It was better to leave Byron alone when he felt so uncomfortable. Since he was so aggressive, anything that flew near him would probably hurt him. I'll have to go out and tell others to be careful. Cloud sighed as he left Byron's room. He planned to tell his sister-in-law, who was in Byron's care, and his niece Laura first. She told Laura, who had never been close to Byron, as she was afraid that Isla, who usually only wanted her father's attention, might get hurt by messing with Byron. That's why my sister-in-law is worried. Cloud laughed self-deprecatingly. It was Isla, a letter that was already destined to be discarded. The girl who had satisfied her need would also be killed once Roderick was murdered. Still, he felt sorry for that girl. Cloud shook his head, shaking off the guilt that continued to sting his heart. Ah. Isla, who was changing out of her sweaty training clothes, sighed involuntarily when the wound on her index finger rubbed against the hem of her clothes. Last night, while trying to open a secret passage, she was hit by a stone wall. It wasn't that bad because it was just a slight peeling of the skin, but he couldn't help but feel a little pain every time he touched it. That? When did you get hurt here, miss? It was just a small friction. During training it was inevitable that small injuries would appear here and there. He was now skilled with sword and bow, so he had no new wounds, but at this time in his last life, his hands were covered in scars. Such a small wound was insignificant. And maybe Laura thought the same, and that's why she went ahead without hesitation. Because there was something bigger this morning than the small cut on his finger. Here, more or less. Now you can treat a wound like that on your own, right? Laura spoke bluntly and placed a basket containing trauma medications such as ointments and bandages next to Isla. It was always like this. This time she was not seriously injured, but even if she was, no one cared about her health. Except Cloud, who showed some compassion. Staring with cold eyes at the medicine bottle that was thrown at her, Laura opened her mouth again. Anyway, today you will have to eat alone. Alone? Because? Isla asked with a voice full of curiosity. Sometimes she ate dinner alone, without Byron, but most of her late breakfasts were with him, which was extremely rare. Well, I guess the owner is uncomfortable. He says he wants to be alone. Did you do something wrong? Laura said, crossing her arms and looking at her with displeasure. It was something she had said for no reason, even though she knew she couldn't have done anything wrong after being locked in her attic all night. But Isla, who was stabbed, felt her heart sink. You probably caught me sneaking in and out of the room, right? Even the mistake wasn't actually a mistake. Not only did he sneak out of the room through a secret passage, but he also entered Byron's room while he was sleeping and discovered his secrets. Due to the ambiguity of the coded letter, nothing was known for certain, but there was no telling what would happen if they were discovered. Then rest. I'll bring her here when the food is ready. Laura said it with a smile. It was so funny to see Isla's face suddenly turn white, and she looked so proud. When Laura closed the hatch and left, Isla, who was left alone, began to seriously worry. No. It's not like they caught me. If she had been caught sneaking into Byron's room, it wouldn't have ended like this. There must have been such a commotion that this ruined building was turned upside down. And then why? Why did Byron suddenly feel so uncomfortable? To find the cause of this, there was something he had to think about first. Was that exactly what happened in the first place, regardless of the changes that occurred when Isla returned to the past? It was to determine if that was the case or if things had changed due to his actions when he returned to the past. Think about it, Isla Weishafen. She scolded herself for trying to remember. It's a name she didn't know was her real name until recently. She called herself Isla Weishafen and her appearance was natural. After wandering through his memories for a while, he concluded that it didn't happen. She wasn't sure, but there were many happy things about her time in that attic. Beautiful landscapes and a special class for the first time in a long time. It was a moment that felt even more precious because the time she was here wasn't that long. However, if there was something sad about not being able to eat with her beloved father during those happy times, she would remember it. Then what is the cause? Isla frowned as she applied a large amount of ointment to the wound on her finger. Part of it was because his wounds were stinging, but more than that, it was more painful not knowing the cause of the sudden change. After the wound was brutally treated, Isla calmly recalled the day. It was a start that was not much different than usual. He started the day quietly, waking up at dawn and running out of the ruins. Wait a minute, then Cloud. Isla was looking for something different than usual and remembered the unusual scene she had seen that morning. An unknown bird that was not commonly seen flew by and Cloud caught it. From a distance, he couldn't see it in detail, but as soon as he saw it, he started thinking and ran towards the building. So maybe Byron's discomfort had something to do with the bird. What if the bird had delivered a letter with bad news and Byron had locked himself in his room after hearing the news from Cloud? Well, then there's only one thing I have to do tonight. It was time to discover what that strange bird brought.